She refers to herself as a creative problem solver. We refer to her as Mary Lou, the girl that knows what to do. Mary Lou has a passion for innovative solutions that certainly came into effect during her 10 years of being the owner of a successful senior care company, which we have had the opportunity to lean off of that. You don't know, we bought her company, Janelle Holloway and I. Especially in recent years, she's done this by continuing to provide compassionate care during the COVID pandemic. She offered, even with employment shortages, she grew the business during that time, being an advocate and has remained an advocate for seniors, leading to selling her company in early this year. 3 years ago, Mary Lou did found the monthly Health and Wellness Speaker Series, and after just selling the company at the beginning of the year, she is focusing on leveraging the series of health and wellness speakers content to provide media opportunities for local healthcare organizations as a resource for care. Additionally, in January 2022, Mary Lou became a certified fearless living coach, not leading coach. After practicing concepts for over 20 years. She continues her coaching by adding more private clients, fearless book groups, which is predominantly sold here, and retreats, all designed to help people understand their own personal barriers, what's holding them back, and how to empower themselves. Her wish for others is that they live a life they fully love. It's captured in a poem called A Splendid Torch by George Bernard Shaw. Share just a brief excerpt of it. Life is no brief candle for me. It is a sort of a splendid torch, which I have got hold of for a moment, and I want it to make it burn as brightly as possible before repainting it on to future generations. So, guys, please give it up for Mary Lou.
Slice paper, nice. Just living your way. So grab a pen. I tend to have this be a little interactive. No one wants to hear me talk and hold, or anyone, but anyway. So welcome this morning. And today we're going to talk about those things that maybe in some area of your life, you have a reason for not doing something. And that's also the reason is all AKA an excuse. Whether you believe it or not, you know, the reason can be very real. And there's a way to work through that and sometimes work around it to not make it an obstacle. So we're going to talk about excuses. We're going to talk about priorities and accountability, all to better understand what's going on with ourselves. And as the title of the talk says, to make better agreements so that we're not committing ourselves to something while we're in that mode of beating ourselves up because we haven't followed through on something. So we know that tools and methods of how to follow through differ, right? We have Tim, for example, this month, who shared how to follow up and what things we need to do. Some people also have accountability buddies. They have people who they check in. Some are formal, like I know Joe's talked about being part of a group where they check in on each other and make sure they're making progress on what's important to them. And then still others use tools like spreadsheets, like Joe shared in the sponsor education, right? Where there's certain actions you can take and you follow up and use a spreadsheet to keep in contact with people in order to help you be accountable with the connections that you have, let's say with customers, so that they can be future customers again. But today we're not really going to talk about tools and methods as much as we're going to focus on supporting yourself and understanding what excuses or procrastination or what's the underlying, as the book says, fear. Now, fear is not, and if anybody's friends with me on Facebook, I just indoor skydiving while I was in New Jersey this past week. It's not about jumping off a building or out of a plane. Fear are those little things that keep us stuck, that keep us in the same mode and the go-to, and sometimes the repeat patterns. Have you ever said to yourself, you know, when I'm a parent or when I grow up, I'm not going to do that, right? Maybe it's your father, your mother, or aunt or uncle that you go, I don't like that, and I'm not going to do that. And what happens, right? You end up doing it. And it's because it's familiar, okay? And there's a whole thing we can talk about staying in your comfort zone. It's your comfort zone, it's what you know. It's not necessarily comfortable because you're not getting the results you might want, but it's familiar. So that's how patterns repeat. And the thing you swore or how you swore you weren't going to be, you look back and go, well, it's a little different. I tweaked it a bit, but pretty much I'm doing what my family or friend or whoever did myself. And that's a really great awareness. A lot of times our excuses come from the fact that we haven't surrendered. We haven't surrendered to that thing we think we're supposed to do, right? So we make a commitment, we say we're going to do a certain thing, but then we procrastinate or somehow it always gets pushed to the back burner. And isn't that fodder, isn't that content for us to beat ourselves up? Because now we've made that commitment, we put everything in front of it, we use that as the reason or the excuse why we haven't followed through. And who here does best when they're beaten down? Either by someone or yourself, no one. So sometimes we have to look at what we made a commitment to, and maybe we're just not ready to do it. And when I say surrender, surrender to the fact that maybe it's just not the right time. Right? I'll use myself as an example. I'm working at launching 3 years worth of health and wellness content on a YouTube channel. And I'm working hard at it. And I had a goal of getting it done this month. Well, I had a couple of family things happening. Elderly 95-year-old parent, relative in Florida that wanted me there. A nephew who my brother passed away last year was graduating. I had choices to make. So could I beat myself up that I don't have it launched yet? Absolutely. But when it came down to it, these were conscious decisions that I made. And I'm not embarrassed about that. And I'm not going to beat myself over the fact that I chose to be with family. I chose to be in those different states. And that to me, because if you heard, you know, what I want my light to burn brightly. And it's not going to burn brightly whether I publish a YouTube channel 1 month earlier than not. But certainly I can make a rippling effect in my family by showing up for my nephew, who lost a grandfather and a dad all in 2 years while he was going to high school, right? So I'm the Aunt Lulu that came and was there for him, took him out, we went skydiving and, you know, whatever. So it's a conscious choice, and that's what I mean about being vulnerable, being raw about it. It's okay. You know, some people say, push through, get it done. There's a certain amount of that works. But if you're losing sleep over it and you're in a deficit because you're beating yourself up, you're not going to have the healthy mind and the stamina to reach that goal line, to reach that, have that touchdown. Sometimes we don't have the skills to do what we commit to. I found that with my YouTube channel. I thought, you know, I'm just going to take the content and plop it there. There's a whole slew of technical knowledge that I could do it if I wanted to spend hour after hour teaching myself to be a graphic designer, but that is not my wheelhouse. That is not where my strength is. So I had to be vulnerable, say, this is not where I want to be spending my time. And I have to pay someone to do that. And when I'm paying somebody to do that, I also have to be more on their schedule than my own. So there's challenges with that as well. You can only push your agenda and your timeline so far. But if somebody, like I had a graphic person, decide to take a 10-day vacation right in the middle of my project. So how much energy do I want to put towards that deadline when I don't have control? I had backups to my backups, but for whatever reason, they didn't follow through. So what we should do kind of is content to beat ourselves up and punish ourselves. So I want to hear from everybody, not everyone, but people who feel compelled to share. What is one word, or maybe a phrase, maybe I'd like to prefer a word. What word do you think describes your experience with the word accountability? Anybody want to share? Yeah, come on.
Priorities.
Okay. Anybody else? Responsible? Often, yes.
A lot of people avoid it.
That's very true. Here,
My word is success.
pardon?
Success.
Success. A lot of times I get a response when we dig deep with a client that it has to do with discipline. All right, when we start, uncovering the layers and the descriptions, often discipline comes up with accountability. That's what they equate it to. So I'd like you on the clean sheet somewhere, write the word accountability, an equal sign to the right of it, and then discipline. So when you think about accountability, is there some dread or some, yeah, I got this, or oh my, I can't do that alone, some fear about that, or maybe I hate accountability, I avoid it like the plague. Feeling weak or lazy. Those are some of the things that people who deal with problems with accountability feel or say. So while it's important to have discipline, to be accountable, what I want you to do is actually make a shift in your thinking. And I want you to slash out the equal sign. And instead of the word discipline, I want you to write the word integrity. So when we boil it all down, right? Discipline and other things like that are actions. But what is the sum total of being accountable? It's our personal integrity, not just to other people, but our integrity to ourselves. Because if we don't have integrity to what we commit to ourselves, again, that's content, that's fodder, that's stuff to beat ourselves up over and pull ourselves down. And again, if we're doing that, we can't be making good agreements. We can, it's difficult to shine when you've got a wet blanket over you. Okay. So take a minute. How am I doing on time?
Yeah, 13 minutes.
Okay, good. So take a minute, and I want you to, I brought this board because I didn't want to spend a couple hours making a form for you. Sorry. Again, a choice. So I want you to come up with three things across the paper. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So you can have like 3 columns. What are 3 things that you're avoiding doing? It could be personal, it could be professional, whatever it is. Just come up with 3 things. And if you can't come up with 3, come up with 1. It's fine. This is not a content to beat you up over. It's just so that you have something in your mind's eye as we move forward. It'll be more impactful if you do. And we're not going to share anything unless you raise your hand and want to share. So feel free to be vulnerable with those things. It's maybe something that you should be doing better, faster, more of. Maybe you haven't even started, or maybe you stopped, or just really doing it very slowly to the point where it's not effective. So just look up at me when you feel good, or put your pen down or give me some kind of signal. Awesome. Put your pen down. Great. So below each of those things, I want you to write, what do you say to yourself? What phrases or go-tos do you think, maybe you don't even say them out loud, but like when you think about doing this thing or having not done the thing or not making progress as quick, what thing are you using to beat yourself up? What comes to mind? Okay. And it might be the same thing for all three.
I do have to say that whenever I think about these sort of things that I need to be doing, the next thing that comes to mind is what is like glaring in front of me that I have to do right now. That's not that thing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And it makes us feel good because we made progress on something else, right? So next, what I want you to do below that for each of those. How would you describe that person that wasn't following through on one or three of these things? And I know I'm asking some people to be more vulnerable than they've ever been, but no one's going to see this. And to get what you can out of this talk, it really helps to do this. So what would you say to that person who hasn't finished their book that they've been talking about doing forever? Or that has not lost weight, even though they talk about it, or maybe not talk about it?
You read that.
It's me too. What would they say about that person who keeps on saying they're going to do a certain thing? No, I'm really going to do it. I'm going to do it. And then it just somehow doesn't get done. Okay, and this is just an exercise to be vulnerable and to take a minute of our day to dig into what rattles around inside of us. And I appreciate you being vulnerable very much. So let's flip the table. How would you feel about yourself? Or what would you say about yourself? And how would you describe yourself when that thing or things that you wrote down is completed? So imagine in your mind's eye, you've accomplished one or all three of those things. What would you write down? What would you say about yourself? And there is magic to writing things down. I just, just trust me, there is. That could be a whole, a full discussion. But when you put thoughts in your mind to paper, it sinks in and you absorb it and you learn from it more. That's the quick answer. So if you lost those 30 pounds, or if you write that book, or you just decided to start dating again, right? So what is the excuse? Now we're going to write down, what is the excuse or the reason? And I'm not trying to be condescending on that, because reasons are based in facts, right? Typically, that's what we think, they're facts. So just because there are facts to support the reason why you're not doing something, it's still an excuse. I just want to make that clear. Because there's either work you can do on the issue, you can pay somebody to do what you can't do, you can choose to postpone something instead of beating yourself up and using the excuse. Or you can choose to break what you said you were going to do. You decide it doesn't work for you. So that's why I'm supporting the idea. Those are examples. of why reasons, even though they're based in facts, are still excuses. We still can choose other options, and I just gave you a few, and there's others. Okay. So we really wanted to take the time to just delve into this, connect with the things that are keeping us stuck, possibly, or fodder for beating ourselves up. And understand that when we tackle these issues, whether it be choosing to move the goalpost, or this doesn't work for me, that's why it's not happening, or I don't have the skill sets like the graphic designer, is it worth my time making infographics for my YouTube channel that takes me half a day or a day? No. In my case, it wasn't. I mean, maybe someone would enjoy that, and that's what they do. So what our goal is to live a life, what I call in the flow. Okay, and in the flow means that we're kicking butt and taking names.
Amen, yes.
But all the while, because we can be kicking butt and taking names, but are you experiencing inner joy? Are you experiencing fulfillment? Are you getting the life that you love? As Tim mentioned in my bio. Is that really how you're living your life? Or is your life about checking things off a list? We only have so much time here, right? And we want to be remembered for maybe what we accomplish. However, if we are not enjoying the journey and we're not in the flow, and the flow is different for everyone, then my opinion, you know, we're basically rejecting what God has made for us or what he wants us to experience. That's just my opinion. You don't have to have the same. You can use spirit, source, whatever. So I really want you to think about those things after you leave here and to think about them differently. I hope I gave you some different ways of thinking about those things so that you can come up with an answer, a vulnerable answer, and admitting that maybe this isn't something that should be on my list, right? I also want to invite you to, now as Tim mentioned, I've been studying fearless living for 20 years. And I always had on my list to become a coach and, you know, kids and business and all these other things. And finally in January, even though I hadn't sold the business yet, and I don't think at that point, because it was January 2021, I don't think I even had a solid buyer yet. I mean, I had interest, but I didn't have anything not nailed down. So I made room in my life to make it happen. And what I've learned from Fearless Living, and it's, you know, through Rhonda Britton, is that there are fears or things that hold us back from seeing things differently. And these are, you know, fear is as smart as we are. So the more savvy we get, the more tricky, and you end up repeating the patterns anyway. So I'm going to pass out some opportunities to work with Fearless Living. I don't know if I have enough for everyone, so if you're totally not interested, just pass it on, that's fine. I'll take a few back here. Yes.
Two things. One, say that I took your Fearless Living class a while ago.
Yes.
Ran across the book yesterday and started looking at it again.
Yes.
That was one of the best things I've invested in for myself.
Thank you.
Was taking to meet with you and the other group.
Yes.
It was wonderful and it really made a difference. What I'm trying to figure out right now, a few years ago, I made a comment about the music that my nephew really liked.
Right.
And I heard my mother's voice and I thought,
We can't help ourselves, we're human.
if I could figure out a way to stop that.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, it was the same word that came out and the first was about the beat.
Sure, sure, yeah. It's because it's what's familiar to us. You know, it wells up, it shows up. And that's, you know, when we talk about comfort zone, that's exactly, you're describing your comfort zone. You know, you see something, you dislike it, and what comes up is what you know. And that's how you reacted to it.
And yet I disliked it when it was happening to me as a teenager.
Right, right. That's a great awareness.
Well, Mary Lou, I'll just have to say that you have always encouraged us to step out of our comfort zone. If we see what we want and we don't have it, we have to do something different to go get what we want.
Yes.
And when we have to do something different, it will get you out of your comfort zone. You do things that are a little scary and you might even wake up in the middle of the night in a sweat, but it's worth it.
Okay.
It's worth it.
Yes.
On your skydiving, just. And that door opened up and it came time, I suspect you did jump out.
Well, it's not a door that you jump, it's actually a tunnel of wind.
Oh.
And you lean
Oh,
into the
she
wind
didn't jump
and
out.
shoot up in the
You went
air.
up in the,
Yeah, that's what indoor skydiving is.
oh, I didn't use the word indoor.
Yes, no.
I was gonna say, I admire your bravery there.
Yeah, no, yeah.
That's a whole other field.
Yeah, that's a real.
Mary, you're a wonderful person. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you. That's.
I think that when you described in the beginning, choosing mechanical business development over family decisions.
Yes,
Or whether it's in the flow,
yeah,
it reminds me of that, the line, to thine own self be true.
yes,
And I think not in a selfish way, but always that should be a master strategy
yeah,
that helps you make those decisions, helps you actually execute the exercise we just went through. And something that I think is great for you to share with us.
thank you. In Fearless Living, we have what we call a wheel of fear and a wheel of freedom. And there's actions and behaviors that we do when we're on each. And what I teach through the book groups and the one-on-one coaching or the wheels, detailed wheels for you specifically, is how to recognize when you're on your wheel of fear and have proactive action. I'm not one to read about a problem. Let me just back up a second. I'll read about it, but then tell me what to do. Give me some actionable item that I can do myself to help myself. It's great to understand something, but if you don't know what to actually either physically, mentally, or some way do to get yourself from one point to where you want to be, then to me, it's great information, but it doesn't actually change my life.
Yeah.
And what I loved about this, and the reason why I've stuck with it for 20 years, is because it is understanding what your wheel of fear is, what your wheel of freedom is, recognizing you're on each, and then tying back to the topic real quick, because we have to end, you know, making decisions or agreements with other people, with yourself, with your spouse, whoever, when you're on your wheel of fear, is going to have you make agreements that are not easy or maybe possible for you to follow through on. So it can really, really change your life. I mean, I'm living proof of it.
Yes. One of the words you used up there that I got a great meaning out of, integrity.
Yeah.